Welcome to MBA 543, St. Francis University. I am Adam Conrad, your instructor. We're going to be talking about Chapter 10, approaching the customer with adaptive selling. So in this chapter, we're going to be talking about the three prescriptions that are included in the presentation strategy, discuss the two-part pre-approach process, describe team presentation strategies, explain how adaptive selling builds on four broad strategic areas of personal selling. We're going to describe the six main parts of the presentation plan and explain how to effectively approach the customer. We're going to describe 7 ways to convert the prospect's attention and arouse interest. So, what's a presentation strategy? It is really a well-conceived plan that includes these three prescriptions. So, essentially, when you talk about the strategic and consultative selling model, we're essentially talking about the foundation for a value-added consultation presentation strategy. So you're going to combine the elements of relationship, product, and customer strategies, and you're essentially going to develop your objectives for your sales presentation, develop your pre-sale presentation plan, and you're going to renew your commitment to providing outstanding customer service. So let's take a look at where this fits into the matrix and the strategic selling. So, keep in mind, strategic selling evolved as a result of lots of competition, more complicated products, and really focusing on customer needs. It's not the 50s where you could just build anything and there's a market for it and people will buy it. Now we are in a position where we have to be very tailored to what our clients need. So essentially, this is what provides the foundation for your presentation strategy, which is really a consultative presentation strategy. So you're going to combine your elements of relationship, product, and customer strategies. And you must develop each of these before you can come up with a presentation strategy. This gets back to that story I told early on where you walk in the doctor's office and they hand you a prescription. You really have to focus on having developed a diagnosis for your particular client before you can go in and start giving them the answers. So again, the from the previous slide, the 3 key prescriptions for the presentation strategy include preparing your objectives, developing that presentation plan, and providing outstanding customer service. When you add, your presentation is going to add value when you position yourself as a resource and not just simply a vendor. And your presentation is based on a carefully developed sales strategy or sales call that basically lays out everything to help meet the objectives for the client. So let's talk about planning the pre-approach. And I can tell you in high-end sales, we may spend days working on a presentation strategy. So our pre-approach essentially is all of the things that are going to go into planning for this meeting. So we're going to review our objectives, review our model. And again, these are all things that are going to occur before meeting with the prospect. And it's really, again, a 2-part process. So the pre-approach and the approach. And so the pre-approach handled correctly is going to give us a lot of detail that we need. So and you can see here, the strategic planning for the approach, review the presentation objectives, review the consultative selling model, review the 6-step presentation plan, and prepare an approach worksheet. And then actions taken toward the approach, telephone contact when appropriate, social contact, including building rapport with them, and then a business contact. So we're going to basically convert the buyer's attention. We're going to have an agenda, the product, the referral, the customer benefits, questions, surveys, or any combination of those to help prepare for what we need information-wise for our presentation. The first sales call in the new prospect. And again, it's very important you think about this process. You have to have a plan for each step along the way. It's unrealistic to think that you're going to, and I teach this in real estate as well, when you meet with somebody to try to say, well, let's get the order in the first meeting is really unrealistic. I mean, they don't know us. They don't know that our product is a fit. We don't have any rapport with the client, with the prospective client. So it's really important that we build that early on. You just can't go for the sale, so to speak, in the first outing. So your first sales your first contact with them is going to involve really establishing rapport. And there's a sales strategy that's often taught that's, sell yourself, sell the company, sell the product. And, depending on the order, but, oftentimes I'll tell you, sell the company, sell yourself, sell the product. They have to believe in you and your company before they'll ever talk about any particular product or service from you. So it's important that you establish that rapport and that they see you as a resource. Obtain permission to ask need identification questions. So you need to ask, is it okay if I ask you some questions about your business and get some information so that it will help us in the future? And then obtain information that you can use to establish their file. So you're basically working on building up a knowledge base so that you can use that to help you in stage 2. So the next step in that is really going to be involving, in stage 2 of the buying process, is involving the customer in a product demonstration, because you're going to have information about their business that will help you in that. And then included with that will be a value justification that says, look, this is what our product does or the service does, and this is how it's going to work for you. And maybe even have collected some data on, the return on investment for them. And then you may compare and contrast different solutions. You may say, look, the light version of our software might work well for you, but the premium or the plus version might give you additional benefits. So regardless of what you're doing, you need to know what you're going to be doing. Regardless of the step, you need to have a plan for each step and figure out what your outcomes are going to be for each step. So you need to know, this is what I hope to accomplish and achieve in each part of the sales process. Team selling has evolved because products and services have become so complex. It has become a major development because you oftentimes need specialists to help gather the data. I mean, you've got clients that bring in their product, they're people that are using the current product or they have a need for a product, and you're going to need sales support people or just support people that are going to be able to help you identify where the real pain, where the real problems are in a company. So that's going to require a more detailed pre-call plan and a clear understanding of the role that each person plays. And then you're going to have in the presentation, and then you're going to have clear presentation objectives. So you may have carved the presentation up into, half-hour slots or blocks of time that each person is going to be working with the client. You may have to bring in different departments to work with. If you think about, take an insurance company, for example, that has multiple departments that software will be touching, you may have to be able to present to, 5 or 6 different departments, and you may need to have specific sales presentation objectives and people to actually deliver a presentation that's specific to that area. A perfect example in an insurance company would be agents or, insurance agents that are out in the field that may need to be able to do quotes. Well, that's going to be different than the back office folks that need to be able to handle claims, for example. So all of those things need to come together. There's a slide here that talks about the discussion. Since this class isn't in person, I may assign this separately as a discussion point for the week. The point of this is really talking about whether you use Twitter or some other type of social media tool. There are other versions of this that actually work specifically within CRM systems. Another one, and this is not more of a kind of a Twitter replacement, but inside companies' resource tools, Slack is often found as a way to help collaborate with teams. So let's talk about planning the approach. So when you move through the steps of setting up this presentation, you're going to need to really think about planning the approach of approaching the client. So you're going to need to review your relationship strategy with the client, the product, and these are all things we've done in prior chapters, but we need to review these strategies to make sure that they're on target. So the relationship we have with the client, the product that we are pitching or talking about today, the customer strategy, and the presentation strategy. So really this is adaptive selling. So it's really, we have to tailor this to the client specifically. And like we talked about in chapter 5, it's altering our sales behavior so that we can improve our communication with our customer. So again, it comes down to a lot of times the relationship needs of the customer, and we need to establish a really good relationship with our client to understand whether, the types of things or the way we're presenting this is actually consistent with the way their purchasing process is going to work. Once you've put that in place, then you've got these strategies, again, that you're going to go back through, and you're going to work on some tactics that you're going to use when you're face-to-face with the customer. So again, the planning approach is going to really be able to let you have that broad, high-level version of all of these strategies, and then you're going to develop tactics that are going to help you work with the client specifically. So let's talk again about the 6-step presentation plan that we talked about in kind of learning objectives for this chapter. So once you've established your objectives for the presentation, the next step or prescription involves developing that presentation plan. So we need to prepare a customized sales presentation, and this is going to take obviously a great deal of time and energy. The good news is once you've done a few of these, there's pieces and parts that you can interchange with other clients. But again, this is going to be very specific to each client these days. But the good news is a lot of the tools and things that you use, you can repurpose for future presentations. It's worth the time to do this right. I can't stress that enough. A lot of folks skip working through a very detailed plan, and for lack of a better term, they go in with a half-baked solution. And the problem with that is if you go in and you're up against a company or a sales rep or a team that's presenting against you, and they're extremely well-oiled and they're extremely on point and they've done a tremendous amount of work that you should be doing, you're going to get beaten and you're going to lose. And there's no prize in sales for second place. So you really need to make sure that you win with your presentation. So the one thing you don't want to do is lose the sale and say, gee, I wished I would have spent more time with this. It's really important to take the time and do this right. It's really worth the time. You don't want to hit or miss presentation. So after careful study of the 6-step presentation plan on this slide, you're going to take and focus on each of these areas. So step 1 is the approach, which you're going to review your strategic consultative selling model, initiate the customer contact. And these have been standardized steps, but keep in mind that you may alter these, obviously, and come up with different versions. So again, the first step is going to be approach. And obviously your approach is going to be a key ingredient to your success. Getting off on the wrong foot obviously is not going to do as well as if you hit it off real well with clients in the beginning. Your attention, paying attention to your client while you're working on approach. I mean, that's going to be building rapport, paying full attention to your client. I mean, getting out your phone during a sales call and answering texts when you're meeting with somebody would be a perfect example of what not to do. And so the key is your approach and doing a good job with approach and building rapport through telephone, social contact. Maybe you've met them at a business meeting or a business contact. It's really being able to show your prospect the influence that you have through the rest of the sales process, your command of company resources, your ability to answer questions or get the right answer for folks is pretty key. The key to approach, again, with all of these steps is to think about what your goal is on each part of each step, is then to move on to the next step in the sales process. So when you're talking about approach, you really want to figure out, how am I going to get to getting them to describe their issues or do some discovery with the client. So it's clear that the type of selling we're talking about here is not a single event. You're going to be doing many, many things over many events in order to get through the process. So a couple of things if you're going to make sales appointments by telephone. And this is very important. And I highly recommend little tips and tricks. Learn to speak on the telephone, practice quite a bit. You'll find that your approach on the telephone and how you sound on the telephone really sets the tone for the type of interactions you're going to have with people. There's all kinds of tricks with this. I mean, you can certainly Google them and get some additional tips for talking on the telephone. One of them in particular is use a mirror. because it's really important that you have an idea of what you're or envisioning the client when you're speaking with them on the phone. Don't be distracted looking at your computer, reading emails, that type of thing when you're on a call talking with somebody. So you want to plan in advance what you're going to say with them. You're going to identify yourself and the company that you represent, state the purpose of your call and explain how they can benefit from a meeting, show respect for their time by telling them how much time this call would take, how much time the appointment will take. And then you confirm the appointment with a brief note, email, message, or letter with the date, time, and place of your appointment. So it's not good enough just that you set this appointment up with them over the phone and you confirmed it by phone. You at a minimum should send an email or some other way of communicating that you have this meeting with them, because while you're on the phone with them, they could simply have forgotten to jot it down. So it's very helpful. Send them a reminder prior to the meeting just to confirm that that's going to take place. So again, it's really, really key that you pay close attention when you do this, because you certainly don't want them to think that you're distracted while you're doing that. Building rapport, social contact and building rapport is another key ingredient with this. So there are a couple of areas of conversation that you can have with folks. You can make comments on here and now observations about, and these can be just specific comments about things that you see on display in the prospect's office. I can tell you, though, that I've seen plenty of people, particularly in purchasing, have fun with this, because they know that a lot of salespeople are going to try to pick up and talk about things that are in their office. So I've actually had funny stories told to me where purchasing people actually have like golf awards and things sitting around their office. And, of course, the sales rep's going to say, "Oh, you're a golfer." And they'll say, "No." And you're really put off your game, so to speak, because you're expecting that to be something that's a common area that you can talk about. So it is important, though, to identify things in the office. Try to discover mutual friends that you have. You can do that again through Facebook. I've been shocked by connections on things like social media and LinkedIn, where I've learned that a particular person knows somebody that I know, and I'm like, well, how do you know that person? Like we look at our social connections and we find one person that we know in common. How do you know that person? And it's really interesting when you start talking about things like that. So discovery of mutual friends or interests can serve as a foundation for a strong social contact. There's one topic that everybody is extremely fond of, and that's themselves. So it's really critical when you're having these conversations to have a chat about them. And again, Dale Carnegie teaches some very good tools for learning how to work with some of these things, and I couldn't recommend them more highly when you're talking about doing things like making contacts and those types of things. So I can tell you a quick story of my own. I was out showing houses one day. One of the things I like to do, because I'm driving a car and the folks I'm showing houses are driving a car, we as a practice don't ride together. But I carry walkie-talkies in my car. So I carry a pair of them so that I can easily talk, and particularly for people that are out of the area, I'll give them a quick little tour over the walkie-talkie. It's much easier than using cell phones. And if there's more than one person in the car, they all can hear it. So I went to reach for my walkie-talkies, and the batteries were dead. So I happened to remember that I have my flight bag in the trunk of my car, and I know I keep spare batteries in my flight bag for headsets. So I opened up the trunk and started scavenging some batteries out of an aviation headset. And the guy that was viewing homes, him and his wife, he looked and said, "That's an aviation headset." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You're a pilot?" And I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Me too." And so without even bringing it up, we've now created a bond. So now we're talking aviation things. So it's just one of those things that when you're doing, and again, it sometimes is hard to make that connection, but once you make that connection, it's extremely valuable to have. So what are some other guidelines? Some guidelines for good social contact. Prepare for a social contact. Research topics of interest to the prospect. Try to figure out what they like. Review your prospect database. You may find that somebody's given you some notes I mean, as a simple thing, Google the folks that you're working with. It shocks me sometimes when people meet with me, don't know anything about me. They haven't Googled me. If you're having a meeting, we should know about each other, and there should be lots of things out there. I mean, this person may be very relevant in the industry and may be writing industry white papers or reports. So when you initiate your social contact, you want to ask open-ended questions. Don't ask yes/no questions. You want to ask open-ended questions. Again, get them talking about themselves, and apply those nonverbal communication skills such as eye contact and a smile that we talked about earlier. So again, these are two guidelines. There's a couple more. Respond to the customer's conversations. Listen to what they're saying and engage them with what they're saying. So when you've asked a question, don't just ask another question, ask more questions about the thing they've answered. So acknowledge the message verbally and non-verbally, listen actively, and use gestures to indicate your ongoing interest. So again, these are very important parts of learning more about making a good social connection. Keep the social contact focused on the customer. Again, this isn't a competition. This isn't, when a guy says he's a pilot, my job isn't to tell him what a great pilot I am. My job is to ask him, well, what kind of, what do you fly? How long have you been flying? Let's ask questions about them, not about me. So now we talked a little bit about making that connection. Let's talk about gaining the prospect's attention. So there are 7 common approaches to gaining the prospect's attention. So we've identified and used a number of effective methods to contact their attention, arouse interest, and transition to the next step in the presentation. 7 of them are mentioned here. So you can have an agenda approach and say, these are the things we're going to be talking about. They will typically circle or highlight the things that they're most interested in. You may have a product demonstration approach. Again, some people, like the CFO of a hospital, is not going to be interested in a product demonstration. The individual people that are using the software will absolutely be interested in that part. A referral approach might be referring an existing client and saying, here's a client, they can talk to you about the benefits of the product or service. Customer benefit approach obviously is specifically talking about the things that are specific to them. Actually, I've got these on a couple of slides. Let's talk about these in detail. So the agenda approach, obviously what you're going to say is, thanks for the meeting. During the next 45 minutes, I'm going to talk about these couple of things. Product approach, we have this big inventory of these sweaters that just came in. And, we've got this, our plant just purchased $300,000 Herix Graphics Composer. I'd like to show you a copy of your sales invoice with your logo printed on it. I mean, so it's just, tying in an event with what might be the product that they're doing or looking at. A customer benefit. Mr. and Mrs. Stewart, my company lists and sells more homes than any company in the area where your home is located. Our past performance would lead me to believe we can sell your home within 2 weeks. Well, there's a good real estate example for you. A referral example. So we could actually get them connected with another customer in their same vertical. A question approach. Will your annual franchise meeting be held in April? So we're now trying to figure out what the timing of this thing is. Survey. I'd like the opportunity to learn more about your accounts receivable and accounts payable procedures. We may be able to develop a customized program that will significantly improve your cash flow. Can I ask you a few questions about your wardrobe or your clothing needs? And then premium. I'd like to give you a publication titled Guaranteed Growth Annuity. So again, you've got some different options here to figure out what's going to get their attention, what's going to matter most to that particular prospect. Or you can do it as a combination. So you might do it as a combination between a referral and a question. You may have somebody that does a referral for you and actually have that referral client ask some questions that you need to know the answer to that they may not tell you. Like one of the things I always have my referrals do is say, what else are you looking at? And what do you like or dislike about the other product or service? And they'll tell the referral, your prospective customer will often tell the referral things that they won't tell you. So that's very helpful to know in terms of your need discovery. So using a combination of those is a really good tactic. And think about these. You learn a lot of these types of things as you practice selling. And so let's talk about for a second about sales call reluctance. I deal with this a lot in the real estate business. There's a lot of folks, I say, spend a lot of time getting ready to sell, but don't actually do any selling. And I think this is a huge problem. There's a lot of activities, a lot of things you can do to be distracted or distract you, or you could spend time with that are non-sales activities, like putting together a brochure or putting together a strategy, but never actually acting on those things. Folks, none of this matters if you don't actually do things. You got to do. You got to act. And the reason is because a lot of folks don't do things because they're afraid. So sales call reluctance includes the thoughts, feelings, and behavioral patterns that conspire to limit what the salesperson is able to accomplish. And it's mostly fear. It's fear of taking risks. It's fear of group presentations, lack of self-confidence, fear of rejection. And frankly, I'll just put it out there, it's laziness. I mean, some folks are just not hard workers and just don't do the work. And it's easy to talk about doing the work, but it's a lot harder to actually do the work. So you got to get out there and do it. How do you help solve sales call reluctance? By doing. You got to get out there and do things. I mean, you can be optimistic, you can practice, you can recognize your fears, be more committed to your goals, but the reality is you got to get out and do it. You got to get out and do presentations, you got to get out and do the work. Even if it's not successful, it's these little bits add up over time and make you more successful. So you got to get out and do it. So in review for chapter 10, we've described the 3 prescriptions that are included in the presentation strategy, the 2-part pre-approach process, the team presentation strategies. We've explained how adaptive selling builds on the 4 broad strategic areas of personal selling. We've described the 6 main parts of the presentation plan, explained how to effectively approach the customer, and described the 7 ways to convert a prospect's attention and arouse interest. We've also talked a little bit about sales call reluctance and the fact that you just need to get out and do things. And that concludes chapter 10.